Hello and welcome back to the garden. It's been an incredibly busy few weeks here and I've worked on lots of weddings, but that's inspired me to invite you into the garden this evening to pick some flowers with me to create a bridal bouquet. I thought it might be fun to talk you through the sorts of flowers that I'm selecting and then create the bouquet with you so you can understand how I put a bridal bouquet together. The first thing that I need are a couple of buckets of water because today has been another hot day and I always cut flowers straight into water to avoid them wilting and they can start to rehydrate as quickly as possible. Once everything has been picked, they will go into our storage barn to condition overnight and then I will work with them tomorrow morning. The first thing that I need is some foliage. That's going to create the framework for my bridal bouquet. So let's go and grab that now. So I'm going to pick two foliages for my base for this bridal bouquet. I'm going to pick some Pittosporum and I'm going to pick some of this hebe. This hebe, as you can see, is in full flower and it's absolutely full of bees. They're loving it. Because of this beautiful white flower, it does form a really lovely soft base for a bridal bouquet. Pittosporum is my go-to foliage for any bridal bouquet purely because it doesn't wilt. It's really important that the base foliage is really good and sturdy out of water. That's more than enough for a bridal bouquet. And I will edit this down once it's conditioned and remove some of the flowers because that's far too much. And this is my grove of Pittosporum. We've got three different varieties in here. We've got one that's completely green, one that's a bit purpley in colour, and one that's got this lovely variegated leaf, and that's the one that I'm going to choose for this bridal bouquet. It's just a little bit softer in colour for a bridal bouquet. I always select 3 stems of foliage because it creates a really nice sturdy base for any flowers that I'm adding in afterwards. Right. Let's go and get some flowers. So for a bridal bouquet, I need 3 sorts of flowers. The focal flowers, the filler flowers, and the airy accents, the ones that are going to bring the bouquet to life, give it some movement and some texture. And for my focal flowers, I've decided to use roses. My dahlias are just coming in. I could choose to use the dahlias, but I love my roses. So these are going to be going into this bridal bouquet. And I'm going to use the pink Queen of Sweden rose from David Austin. It's one of my favourite varieties of rose. It's got this lovely upward facing pink rose and it's absolutely perfect for bridal bouquets because it's relatively thornless. In addition to the Queen of Sweden rose, I'm also choosing Emily Bronte from David Austin, which has got really beautiful, lovely ruffles when the buds start to open. All the roses that I'm picking, I'm making sure that they are not too open. They have not been heavily pollinated by the bees and they're not going to immediately drop their petals. So when I'm cutting, I always make sure I'm cutting to a leaf, just like I would when I was deadheading these roses. And I try and remove as many of the leaves before I leave the cutting garden. And it just composts down in the flower bed. Everything then goes straight into the bucket of water for conditioning. So now I've got my roses and I know what colours I'm going to be working with. And now I'm going to walk through the rest of the cutting garden, find some filler flowers and some of those airy accents to create the rest of the bouquet. So let's go and take a look at what else is looking fabulous. So this is one of my favourite filler flowers. This is a variety of Elia called the Pearl, and it's got these lovely white daisy-like flowers, and it works beautifully as a filler. So I'm definitely going to cut some of those. With this variety of Achillea, you need to make sure that it is as fully open as possible. That way it's not going to wilt. Sometimes some of these younger in bud flowers can wilt. So the most amount of flowers that there possibly are that are open, the better. I think just 3 of those will be enough. Really beautiful flowers. Another great filler is Amimagus. It really is great to use at the base of the bridal bouquet. You do need to make sure that it is as open as it possibly can be, but is not yet dropping all of its tiny, tiny, tiny flowers. Otherwise, if you pick it too early, it will wilt. And if you pick it too late and it's dropping, it will shed all over the bride. Again, just a couple of stems is all that I need. One of my personal favourite fillers is phlox. This is the annual phlox, and we've got lots of different varieties in here which provide lots of different types of colours. I absolutely love this cherry caramel one. We've also got a variety called creme brulee, which is another favourite with our wedding customers. So I think I'm going to pick some of this beautiful cherry caramel because I think it's going to work really well with my pink Queen of Sweden roses. Another essential for my bridal bouquet is cosmos. Some would argue that actually cosmos is a focal flower, but I tend to use it more as a filler. We've got lots of different varieties in here, and I think I might pick 1 or 2 of these beautiful cranberry ones to go with some of the white ones, and that's going to be picked up through the colour within the phlox. I love using these little pops of colour sometimes. I haven't picked many stems, just 5, but that's going to be enough for this bridal bouquet. So this is how our flower selection is looking so far. I think I need to go and find some flowers that are going to add those airy accents now. This is my patch of scabious. I've got perennial scabious in here and the annual scabious. And these really lovely pincushion-like flowers look fabulous just bobbing on the top of a bridal bouquet. So I definitely want to pick some of these. I've got one of the flowers here which is quite red and it really might not go. Once I've got everything conditioned and I've put all the flowers together, then I can make a decision as to what I'm actually going to use. Sometimes it's better to have 1 or 2 more experimental flowers and then discard them later and just enjoy them in the house. But I like to have a few selections that are a bit more interesting, a bit more different, and it's okay to just discard things if it doesn't work. So I'm quite happy with my flower choices so far, but there's a couple of other things I think I might like to use as fillers. I'm going to pick up some feverfew, a couple of snapdragons, and then the last final flourish is some tendrils from the sweet pea vines. Whenever I'm picking anything, I'm always stripping the leaves off the lower stem. That means that there's not going to be any bacteria in the bucket as the flowers condition. Three stems should be enough. When I'm picking sweet pea, I could just pick the stem, but actually I like to use a whole section of the vine. It gives these lovely twiddly tendrils, which I really find is lovely for adding some extra texture, and it makes it look so much more garden gathered. Just a pair of those is enough, I think. Right, I think I've got all the flowers ready for my bridal bouquet. So these flowers are now going to go and sit in our barn, which is lovely and cool and dark. And that's exactly what cut flowers need. They want somewhere that's really cool so that they can have a really good drink and hydrate after being cut. Then by tomorrow morning, they're going to be ready for me to work with, and I will create a bridal bouquet and show you how I do it. So the flowers have conditioned overnight, and I am going to work with them in the barn before it gets too hot. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the flowers out of the bucket and pop them into these vases of water so that I can separate all the flowers out and see what I've got. Some flowers, like Feverview, have multiple side shoots on a single stem, and these are long enough to use within the bridal bouquet. So I'm just snipping them off and stripping off the leaves. I'm trying to do as much preparation as possible before I start making the bouquet, because once I'm holding onto the bouquet, it's really difficult to actually work with the stems. So as much preparation beforehand as possible is really, really useful. Stems like my Amimagus have lots and lots of side shoots, but these will wilt out of water. The ones that are in full flower won't. So I'm going to leave that one, but all of these little side shoots I'm going to remove, because there's nothing worse than a bridal bouquet with lots of wilting stems. So now all of the flowers are put out into the vases, I can really see what kind of colours I've got to work with. I've chosen a colour palette for this bridal bouquet of pinks, creams, and I've taken inspiration from the cherry caramel phlox, which has got this lovely cranberry colour. Now that I've looked through everything, there's one flower that is standing out as not sitting comfortably with all the others, and that's this really beautiful rose. I absolutely love it. I love these kind of apricot-y colours, but it just doesn't sit really comfortably with the pale pinks and that cranberry colour. So I'm going to discard this. This is going to come in the house with me. I will enjoy it. And it's lovely scent, but it's not going to go into this bridal bouquet. Everything else, however, is going to. So I'm now going to work on my foliage and create a base. So I'm going to edit through the foliage that I've got and create the base for the bridal bouquet. So here's the Hebe that I picked yesterday, and I really need to remove a lot of it because otherwise this is going to make a really vast bridal bouquet. So I'm going to edit it down quite considerably, and so I've just got the bare minimum amount of Hebe. If I was going to be making buttonholes, I might keep these little side shoots because they would make really lovely buttonholes. If you just snip them down, you can strip them back and make some lovely buttonholes with those. And finally, sorting out my pittosporum, removing any of the stems that are going to be below the level that I'm going to be holding on to them, just so they're a little bit tidier and easier to work with. Right, okay, so all of my stems have been tidied up and I'm now ready to start making up my bridal bouquet. So I'm going to start with the foliage, and I really use the foliage just to interlock the stems together in my hand, and I'm using my hand all the time as a bit like a vase, so I'm always creating kind of a vase shape with my hand, and I'm interlocking all of the stems together, and they will hold all of the flowers really nice and rigid. The Hebe's going to go in next, And once these are in, I can then snip them down to create a shape that I actually want. All of my bouquets have a really kind of natural look to them. They look like they could be growing organically within the garden. And I really want to keep some of these kind of like looser bits because I think that adds that sort of organic nature to it. But I also don't want it to sit too high for the bride. I'm going to use a mirror. I always use a mirror to check to see how the bouquet looks against a person. I'm using that the whole way through the creation of the bouquet, just to make sure that it's nice and balanced and that it's looking how I want it to look. Right, okay, I'm going to snip some of the stems down a little because it makes it easier to work with them. Now I'm going to go for my focal flowers. I always try and put the roses in first because they've got quite a thick stem. They need to work their way through before there's too many other flowers in there. So I'm going to add the roses in and then we'll fill in around it. So when I'm placing the flowers in, nothing is sitting too tight into the base of the bouquet, keeping it really nice and loose at this stage. Now you can see it's already starting to look quite bridal. These hebes and the roses alone look really, really lovely together. Now I'm going to start to add my filler and fill in some of these gaps. And the first flower that I'm going to use is my Amimagus. The Amimagus I'm pulling down quite tight into the bouquet because I am actually going to sit other flowers on the top and in amongst the flower heads. Right, a little more filler, some of the Elia. And now perhaps a bit of the beautiful feverfew for those lovely daisies. It looks really summery. So it's starting to really look very, very pretty, but it's still very soft. I want to add that cherry caramel phlox in here and then the pops of cranberry from the cosmos and the scabious. Right, okay, let's try some of this cranberry coloured cosmos in there. I'm leaving this one up quite tall because I want it to bob around and move as somebody walks around. It just gives that lovely bit of movement. I'm going to add my snapdragons now. I always like to have the snapdragons slightly towards the back because they're a bit taller and they will also catch on things as well. So I tuck them down a little bit into the bouquet, but I think it adds a little bit of extra kind of height and shape to the bouquet. Right, I've not added my sweet peas yet. I'm going to look at how best I can fit that in, and then I'm going to remove the tendrils that are going to be in the way. One of the things I love is a wonky stem. So you can see this scabious has got a real wonky stem, and that works really well because it's going to be able to be highlighted within the bouquet. So I'm going to pop that in right in the middle. Can you see how these scabious are bobbing around when I move the bouquet? This is going to look so lovely when a bride is walking down an aisle and they are carrying their bouquet and it's bobbing along, it just will look so pretty and it makes all of the flowers stand out. I think it's almost finished. I'm just going to pop this little cosmos on the side so that when the bouquet is seen from the side angle, there are a couple of flowers over there as well. Right, I'm happy with that. I'm going to tie it off. So I always tie everything off with twine, and once it's tied up, I then take a really good look at it and make sure that I'm happy with how the flowers look. So now that I'm happy with it, I'm going to give it another binding of twine, which will look a little bit neater than my really thin twine. I use some nice, really thick jute twine to bind around the stems, and that gives the bride something a little bit more substantial to grip onto. Right, now that it's all tied up, I'm going to snip the stems so that it's all nice and neat at the bottom. So here we have it, the finished bridal bouquet. I've incorporated lots of scent into this bouquet. Sweet peas and roses, they're smelling absolutely gorgeous. And I think it's really important for bridal bouquets to have scent, because as soon as a bride smells sweet peas in the future, it's going to take them straight back to that special day. I also have incorporated a silk ribbon for this bouquet. I think it's really lovely to have silk ribbons that pick up the colours from within the bouquet. They add an extra sense of movement and texture and luxury to the bouquet. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed coming into the garden and picking flowers and creating a bridal bouquet with me. And I really hope to see you soon. Bye.